My childhood ended abruptly on a crisp autumn morning, just a few weeks after my 10th birthday. That was the day my father, Thomas, simply vanished. He left for work as usual, a quick kiss on my forehead, a promise to take me fishing that weekend. But he never came home. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then years. The police investigations dwindled, the missing person posters faded, and the hope in my mother's eyes slowly died. They called him a missing person, then presumed him dead. My mother, Sarah, a strong but heartbroken woman, was left to pick up the pieces, raising me and my younger brother, Leo, alone. Life became a before and an after. Before Dad, there was laughter, 2 incomes, a sense of security. After Dad, there was quiet struggle, Mom's constant worry etched around her eyes, and a gaping hole in our family. I grew up quickly, taking on responsibilities beyond my years, trying to be strong for Mom and Leo. I carried the weight of his absence, the unanswered questions, the phantom pain of a missing piece. We visited his grave, a small, unmarked plot we made our own, a place to grieve the man we believed was gone forever. He was a memory, a lost hero, a tragic story whispered in our family. My mother, a beacon of resilience, never remarried. She dedicated her life to us, working tirelessly, shielding us from the harsh realities of our new normal. She rarely spoke of Dad, her grief too profound, too private. If I asked, her eyes would cloud over, and she'd change the subject, focusing instead on my grades or Leo's soccer practice. I respected her pain, believing it was too raw to touch. I didn't realize then that her silence was a carefully guarded shield, protecting not just her grief, but a far more devastating secret. As the years passed, the world changed. The internet became a pervasive force, connecting lives in ways unimaginable when my father disappeared. My amateur sleuthing, a quiet obsession born of unanswered questions, intensified. I spent countless hours trawling old forums, missing persons databases, even venturing into the nascent world of social media, searching for any trace, any whisper of what might have happened to him. It was a compulsion, a desperate need for closure, a way to keep his memory alive, even as my mother tried to move on. Looking back, the cracks were subtle, almost imperceptible. Sometimes, Mom would receive strange, anonymous cash payments in the mail. Not large sums, but enough to ease our financial burdens for a month or two. When I asked, she'd vaguely say it was just an old kindness, or a relative helping out. Her explanations always felt a little too vague, her eyes a little too evasive. I accepted it, grateful for the unexpected relief, never pushing for details. Then there were the rare phone calls. Mom would take them in the quietest part of the house, her voice hushed, almost panicked. If I walked in, she'd quickly hang up, her face pale, her hands trembling. Wrong number, she'd always say, her smile strained. I noticed she'd sometimes disappear for a day or two, claiming to be visiting a distant ailing relative, but always returning looking more tired, more burdened. I attributed it to the endless complexities of adult life, the unseen struggles my strong mother silently endured. I didn't realize then that these were not just cracks, but gaping chasms, hinting at a truth far more profound than I could comprehend. A persistent peculiarity was my mother's rigid refusal to ever move away from our small town. She'd say, "This is our home, honey. Your father loved this place." But there was a possessiveness in her voice, almost a fear of leaving, that felt disproportionate to simple sentimentality. It was as if she was chained to the town, a prisoner of its familiar streets and its unspoken rules. I didn't realize then that her attachment was a desperate attempt to maintain control over a narrative, to keep a dangerous secret buried. The most unsettling crack, though, was the way my mother reacted to any mention of fresh starts or moving on. She'd become agitated, almost panicked. She'd insist that we belonged here, that your father wouldn't want us to leave. It was an almost obsessive clinging to the past, a refusal to embrace a new future. I always felt a faint sense of being stuck, trapped in a narrative that wasn't entirely mine. I didn't realize then that my entire family's existence was a carefully constructed lie, and my father, the man I mourned, was somehow at the heart of it. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with the chilling click of a mouse. It was late, past midnight, years after my father's disappearance, when my online sleuthing finally paid off. I was deep down a rabbit hole of old census records, property deeds, and obscure local news archives, trying to find any trace, any breadcrumb my father might have left behind. I had a few vague theories, a few dead ends, but nothing substantial. Then, I typed his full name, Thomas Miller, into a lesser-known public records database, adding a detail I'd recently learned from an old family friend, his unusual middle name. The search engine whirred, and a single, unexpected result popped up. A recent property tax record. Not in our state. But in a small, quiet town, hundreds of miles away, nestled in a completely different part of the country. The address was listed under the name, Thomas Miller. My breath hitched. My heart stopped. It couldn't be. This had to be a mistake, a common name. But a gut feeling, a cold dread, propelled me forward. I cross-referenced the address with Google Street View. A 2-story house, a picket fence, a swing set in the yard. Perfectly normal. And then, my eyes landed on the mailbox. The name written on it, clear as day, the Miller family. My hands trembled as I typed, Thomas Miller, into a local social media search, adding the town's name. The results flooded in, a sickening torrent of images and profiles. A profile belonging to a woman named Sarah Miller, smiling, arms around 2 young children. And then, a photo album. Family fun at the lake. And there he was. My father. Older, yes, with streaks of gray at his temples, a few more lines around his eyes, but undeniably him. He was laughing, tossing a small girl into the air, a picture of domestic bliss. And beside him, the woman named Sarah. And the 2 children, a boy and a girl, looking strikingly like him. A new family. His new family. My breath hitched. My blood ran cold. The world went silent, then exploded into a million shattering pieces. It was like a sudden, brutal awakening, a blinding flash of lightning that illuminated the darkest corners of my life. My father. Alive. Not a missing person, not a tragic memory. But a man who had abandoned us, who had built an entirely new life, a new family, a new identity, as if we, my mother, my brother, and I, never existed. The date on the social media post was just last week. And the photo of the family at the lake? It was taken on the anniversary of his disappearance. The emotional chaos was instant, overwhelming. Heartbreak for my mother, Sarah, a searing, guttural pain that twisted inside me, not just from his betrayal, but from the brutal knowledge of the secret she had kept, the grief she had lived, the lies she had told me about his disappearance. Anger at my father, a hot, venomous rage that pulsed through my veins, consuming me, for his calculated deception, his profound abandonment. Shame, for being so blind, so naive, so utterly fooled by the man I mourned as a hero. And silence. A deafening, echoing silence in my own home, a silence that magnified the screams in my head. My childhood. My memories. My grief. All of it, obliterated in a single, devastating moment. The man who was supposed to protect me, who was supposed to be my father, had simply walked away, erased us from his life, and created a new, happier one. He hadn't disappeared, he had escaped. I looked at the photos again, focusing on his smiling face, the children's innocent joy. He was living a life that was meant for me, for Leo, for my mother. He had stolen our future and replaced it with a lie. And that's when I realized, he never loved me the way I loved him. What came after was a raw, visceral struggle for survival. I didn't want revenge that would just burn everything down, I wanted truth, justice, and a chance to reclaim my life. I needed peace, and peace wouldn't come from silence or passive acceptance. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen, the pictures of my father's new life mocking me. My mind raced, trying to grasp the magnitude of his betrayal, and the complicity of my mother's silence. The immediate shock gave way to a cold, hard fury. There was no going back. The truth had to come out. The first, and most agonizing, step was confronting my mother. She walked in, carrying groceries, her usual tired smile on her face. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply placed my laptop on the kitchen counter, open to the page showing his new family, his smiling face. "Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm, devoid of emotion. "You knew, didn't you? He didn't disappear. He left us. For them." Her face went white. Her eyes darted to the screen, then to me, filled with a mixture of terror and profound defeat. She started sobbing, a raw, guttural sound, begging for forgiveness, pleading for understanding. She confessed everything. He hadn't disappeared. He had run off with another woman, a woman he had been secretly seeing for years, before he ever left for work. He had planned it meticulously, faking his disappearance, covering his tracks, orchestrating a complete break from his old life. He had wanted a fresh start, a life free from responsibility, from us. She had found out shortly after he left, not from him, but from a private investigator she secretly hired, desperate to know what happened to the man she loved. She discovered his new life, his new family. She was devastated, but he threatened her, warned her not to expose him, promising to never support us if she did. He wanted a clean break, a new identity. So, she kept the secret, protected him even in his absence, raising us alone, living with the lie, enduring the poverty, all to save us from the shame, and to secure the meager anonymous payments he occasionally sent. She truly believed she was protecting us, sparing us the brutal truth of his abandonment. "I loved him so much, honey," she wept. "I thought he would come back. I didn't want you to hate him, to feel abandoned." The anger that ripped through me was unlike anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just my father's betrayal, it was my mother's decades of silence, her complicity in the lie, her sacrifice of our truth for his convenience. She had robbed us of our right to know, to grieve properly, to move on authentically. The second limb was severed. The trust with my mother, once unbreakable, shattered into a million pieces. My next step was to expose him. Not just to his new family, but to the world. I collected all the evidence, the police reports of his disappearance, the missing person files, the property records, and the damning social media photos. I hired a private investigator to gather even more details, to verify his new identity, his new life. I then contacted a local news channel, a reputable investigative journalism team. I shared my story, my evidence, my pain. The story broke like a bombshell. Man presumed dead for 15 years found living double life. The news spread like wildfire, a national scandal. His new life, built on lies, imploded. The woman he married, his new wife, was devastated, her own life shattered by the man she thought she knew. His new children, innocent victims, were thrust into a nightmare. He was forced to confront his past, his elaborate deception laid bare for the world to see. My revenge wasn't about vindictiveness, it was about justice and reclamation. It was about ensuring he faced the consequences of his profound abandonment, that his new family knew the truth, and that my mother and I could finally find closure. He was arrested, charged with various forms of fraud related to his fake disappearance and false identity. He faced legal repercussions, public humiliation, and the loss of his new life. It was a hollow victory in some ways, but it was a necessary one. I cut ties with him completely. There was no going back, no forgiveness for a betrayal so profound, so multifaceted. The man I had mourned for 15 years was a stranger, a coward who chose convenience over family. My relationship with my mother was complex. Her decades of silence had caused immense pain, but I eventually understood her desperate, misguided attempts to protect us. It was a long road, but we slowly began to rebuild our connection, not on the old lies, but on a fragile, newfound honesty. It was messy, painful, but ultimately, redemptive. I didn't want revenge. I needed peace. And that peace began to bloom when I accepted that my story wasn't about his failure, but about my resilience. It was about standing up for the truth, about fighting for what was right, about proving that I could emerge from the wreckage stronger, wiser, and infinitely more whole. I learned that sometimes, the greatest betrayals lead to the most profound discoveries about yourself, and the true meaning of family. My journey to truth was painful, but it led me to a profound understanding of who I am, and who truly protected my heart. I thought losing them would destroy me, but it made me who I am. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who protects your heart.